Okay, I know how late I am with this recap video, but what can I say? Rini plus Heatwave living on the top floor of an apartment block does not mix well, especially with trying to get content done, so I'm sorry guys. Just think of this as a refresher before the second half of the patch. 2.4 has got to be up there for me in terms of storytelling in Wuthering Waves. There were lore dumps, more information on the Dark Tide, as well as rinascita in general. And it ended on the most annoying yet greatest cliffhangers I've ever seen so far. Now, I know that skip button can be ever so tempting and sometimes we may miss things the first time. But that's what I'm here for, because today we are here to discuss all the ins and outs of the latest main story quest, Shadow of Glory. Please remember that this video is very spoiler heavy and includes lore crafting, lore analysis, and speculations on the 2.4 patch. So if you haven't played it yet and don't want to be spoiled, pause this video and I will be here when you get back. With that being said, let's get into the video. We find ourselves back at the Anomaly, in search of Kartathea, who is nowhere to be found. Something is wrong. The Blessed Maiden has gone completely missing, with her traces leading to the archipelago across the waters from Maguna, the other nation in rinascita, Septimont. Before Rover is to set off in search of Kartathea, they decide to check in with Cantarella and asks her for any information she has on the unknown territory of Septimont, in which she explains that Septimont does not believe in the Sentinel, but instead they believe in themselves. Not in like a self-help kind of way, but they are a nation of mighty warriors with one simple creed: all for glory, fear no death. Which totally sounds inviting and not intense at all. Although it may sound that way, Cantarella reassures the Septimontians are much more open-minded and accepting of Outlanders. Quite different to their sister nation of Raguna. It turns out that every 4 years, Septimont hosts the Great Aegon, which is very popular among not only the city, but visitors from all across Solaris. This would be the perfect time for Rover to visit, and with that, we have arrived at Septimont. But things aren't as epic as they seem. For starters, Rover is unable to communicate with Abby, who now appears to be dormant in their tacit mark. Rover uses the link between themselves and Kartathea to search for traces of where she could be. Kartathea had definitely been there before, so all Rover can do is venture further into Septimont and hope they will eventually find her. Rover comes across a nearby village of Septimontians, with many of them discussing their excitement for the Great Aegon. When Rover was searching for traces of Kartathea, they saw an image of her facing a half-human, half-lion creature wearing armor, in which the locals inform Rover that that creature they are referring to sounds a lot like the guardian echo of Septimont, the lioness of glory, Arsinosa, said to be born of the power and pride of the Septimontians. As the guardian of Septimont, Arsinosa reveals herself at every Great Aegon to provide her blessing to the champion. As Rover is about to head deeper into the city, they are greeted by a girl named Wuthering, a traveling Taoist from Mengzhou, and a friend of Janshin. Also, can I just say I absolutely adore Wuthering's accent and personality. I just think she's such a refreshing addition to the cast, and I can't wait to see more of her. Wuthering explains that searching for someone in rinascita is just no good. There are too many interferences that are hard to overcome. Before the conversation can continue, Wuthering literally disappears. I guess she was right about how difficult it is searching for someone here. When speaking to a senior Septimontian, he explains that in Septimont, strong emotional frequencies tend to settle within things, and that is how Arsinosa came to be, and that it is believed that the Sentinel came to Septimont not long after Arsinosa was born. But after their meeting, the Sentinel never returned back to Septimont. Now, looking back at everything that we know so far, this is probably just before Imperator became merged with the Leviathan, which could explain why they never returned. The Septimontians believed that they were just simply strong enough to deal with anything they may face, with Arsinosa as their guardian. As Rover journeys further into the city, they come across a mighty warrior, a girl with pink hair who also sniffs them. Yeah, I don't know. Her name is Lupa, and she is caught in the midst of a fight with a man named Emilio, who appears to be upset with Lupa over her defiance of match fixing in the Great Aegon. With the help of Rover, Emilio eventually runs off, and Rover is finally able to get a proper introduction to Lupa, who is impressed by Rover's combat skills. She then suggests that the two of them team up to take on the Great Aegon. In that moment, Rover senses Cartathea's frequency on Lupa and takes this as a sign to agree to teaming up. And if they win, then maybe Rover could ask Arsinosa if she has seen Cartathea. After signing up, the duo are thrown into their very first battle in the Great Aegon. And as soon as they are victorious, they are swarmed with fans. Not of the Rover, but of Lupa, who seems to be a celebrity of Septimont. In fact, she is the star gladiator. As the crowd becomes more and more intense, Rover and Lupa quickly make their escape. It turns out that Lupa is from one of the noble families in Septimont named the Silvers, but she doesn't exactly agree with many of their operations, especially the illegal betting system they are part of. Lupa believes that there should always be fairness in the Great Aegon. That way, only those who are truly worthy have the right to ascend. Amidst their conversation, they are interrupted by a man named Cather, who was previously Lupa's manager, said to have the gift of knowing exactly the right words to say to anyone, which Lupa notes is also a flaw of his. He had been sent by the head of the family, Julia Silva, to convince Lupa to return home, but the thing is, he doesn't really try hard or try at all to get her to come back. Instead, he warns her of the consequences she may face for turning her back on the family. She may be the Silver Star, but they could easily snuff out that star in an instant. It sucks, but unfortunately, those are the rules of the nobles in Septimont. OMG, the noble family is being corrupt? Color me shocked. However, Lupa refuses to bend the knee. The duo swiftly exit their conversation with Cather and make their way to Capitoline Hill in hopes of winning their second match. After winning their match, Rover senses Cartathea, and an image of her standing in an area covered in water flashes in their mind. Lupa later explains that that place is now abandoned because of the first dark tide in Laguna. Due to safety concerns, the main city district was relocated further up the hill. But when they get there, Cartathea again is nowhere to be seen. While entering the upper city, Lupa mentions that although she has never heard of the name Cartathea, the name sounds strangely familiar to her. It turns out that the two do technically know each other, maybe, kinda, sorta. Honestly, it's unclear what we are actually experiencing throughout this quest. All we know is that Cartathea has been there before and may have met Lupa, or at least a version of Lupa. The scene shows Cartathea coming across an injured Lupa, exhausted from battle. Lupa explains that she has tried many times to leave the city, but something she calls the White Tidal Blight, which may be a version of the Dark Tide, follows her wherever she goes. Cartathea states that she had just arrived in Septimont, and that the entire city is covered in some sort of great mist, infested with tacit discords. But what exactly is happening? And why does the Septimont that Cartathea is in look so different to the Septimont that Rover is in? Before we can learn more, we return to Rover and Lupa's journey. And the two have finally arrived at the Griffon's fortress of Capitoline Hill. In Septimont, strength and power go hand in hand. Nobles get more, but they better prove they're worth it and pull their weight for the city. If a noble house's heir is not strong enough to do well in the Great Aegon, it demonstrates that the house is unfit to protect Septimont, and because of this, many houses fall. Of course, it sounds harsh and brutal, but it's the Septimont's way of survival. Strength truly is everything to them. They despise weakness, worship strength, and crave glory. That is the Septimont way. Lupa decides to take Rover to a nearby restaurant for some food, and during their meal, the owner Fulvia gives Lupa restored footage of major matches of the most famous contenders of the Great Aegon. One of them being the current Ephor, which is basically the political leader of Septimont named Augusta, who had won the last Aegon and became the Ephor, and the other footage being of Lupa's most favorite contender, a girl named Mia. Lupa admired how much heart and strength Mia had while throwing herself into every battle, but unfortunately, Mia disappeared halfway through her Aegon. Some say she got tangled up in illegal betting scandals, and others think the pressure from her manager drove her to leave Septimont. But of course, no one ever really learned the truth of what really happened to her. Rover decides that after a long day, it is time to get some rest. But after what happens next, I'd assume once Rover wakes, they would be far from well rested. Because once they do go to sleep, they are greeted by Filova in a hellish dreamscape who is creepily thrilled to meet Rover once again. Not in the heat of battle, but I guess in a more calmer atmosphere, if you could even call this place calm. In typical Vlhova style, she begins speaking in riddles, to which Rover basically says, cut the BS and tell me what the hell is going on. Vlhova explains that she has an associate who has an adoration for heroic tales. For this reason, Kartathea's disappearance and the anomaly Rover had sensed are all but the doings of that very associate. But what is this person's plan? Well, okay, we know that it's Cristoforo, so what is Cristoforo's plan? To which Vlhova's ominous response is, every hero's tale begins with a trial. She hands Rover a red book and tells them to read it, and that she hopes that one day her and Rover will no longer be enemies. Very reminiscent of Scar telling Rover back in 1.0 that if they knew everything, they would want to be allies with the Fraxidus, not foes. And honestly, that is so freaking creepy because what does that mean? Is Rover really the hero of the story? Or like many things in Solaris, are they not what they seem? Something that I find interesting is that Cristoforo believes that the closer one stands to the protagonist, the greater their influence over the tale. But the true lead of this story he is weaving has yet to emerge, which may mean that Rover may not be as important as we may think in this situation. The book that Vlhova gives to Rover prophesizes Lupa becoming the harbinger of the dark tide in Septimont. All glory will be consumed, and the pride of heroes will dissolve within a blackened maelstrom. Such is the finale she holds most dear. This story is short, and will only last 3 days when the final match is completed in the Great Aegon. And this next part genuinely had me shocked, because Vlhova basically tells Rover to end Lupa's life and claim the glory for themselves. By doing so, they could change the ending of the story. Well, at least according to Vlhova. But of course, that's not really Rover's style, and Rover has no reason to trust Vlhova. With that, Rover awakens from their dream, and it is the day of the Great Aegon semi-finals, where the two must face the Silvers. Therefore, Augusta makes her appearance and gives a speech to the people of Septimont. The battle is intense and fierce, but during it, something goes awry. Lupa, in an almost possessed state, turns her blade to Rover, which she assumes is a ploy of the Silvers, but Rover recognizes it as remnants of the dark tide. After defeating the Silvers, Lupa brings the situation to the attention of Augusta and accuses the Silvers of playing dirty. Lupa's theory is that the very spear that was gifted to her by Julia Silva had been tampered with, and of course, Julia sternly denies and asks for proof. And proof she shall receive. Well, kinda. The Septimont priestess Yuno makes a grand entrance, and Priestess Yuno agrees. She declares that the Silvers are guilty. Lupa explains that Yuno can foretell fate and has the power to make final calls in Septimont. Although most people trust her judgment, Yuno is regarded as a bit of an extremist. Nevertheless, House Silva is banished from Septimont. Shortly after, Rover decides to take a breather to gather their thoughts. Vlhova had said that her associate can weave fate and stories. And if that's true, it means his forte can influence how things play out. But he must have limitations. If he could freely bend the fabric of reality, surely the Fraxidus would have overrun Solaris already. Which begs the question, is this the real Septimont? Amidst the racing of Rover's thoughts, we are greeted by Buling once more. Instantly, Buling notices the red book that Vlhova had given to Rover in their lap. She gets out a mirror and states that Rover shall be the one to break the deadlock of the anomaly in Septimont. She then hands the mirror to Rover and says that in order to get out of this mess, she's going to need Rover's help. Through the mirror, Rover is able to see images of the past. A conversation between two spectators can be heard discussing what was happening during Mia's Great Aegon. One spectator expresses their concerns for Mia's ability to actually win the tournament, especially since she's not from a noble family, and it is usually someone who is from a noble family who is crowned the victor. It is also said that Mia is originally from Raguna. Once the mirror's image ends, Buling has once again disappeared. Regardless, Rover continues on, using Buling's mirror to study more images of the past. A discussion between a manipulative manager and an unsatisfied instructor can be heard, and it is revealed that during the Aegon, Mia's mind had begun to unravel, with her experiencing many hallucinations and hysteria. Apparently, it had gotten so bad that Mia could be seen crying in the lounge, which of course is a big no-no when it comes to the ideal gladiator. To Septimontians, especially during the Great Aegon, everything must look perfect for the show, including the gladiators themselves. Gladiators must be able to connect with the audience and hold a crowd. If they fail to do so, things just get a little bit too boring for everyone, which I know is a crazy thing to say out loud, but it's the truth. Later on, the mirror shows us an image of a distraught Mia attempting to calm down, reflecting on her journey as a gladiator. Whatever she had went through, it is safe to say that it is far from the glitz and glamour of a star gladiator. And honestly, this scene definitely tug on my heartstrings. Shortly after, Rover meets back up with Lupa and gets a little jump scare as they sense the Thenodian's frequency within Lupa. Fun fact, when I was going over the quest while half asleep and saw the scene again, it genuinely made me jump. So thanks, Wuwa. We are then returned to the scene with Kartathea, who is accompanied by an injured Lupa, who have apparently been together for a few days. The tidal blight is spreading fast, and Lupa appears to not be recovering well. The anomaly they're experiencing must come from a specific power. Kartathea also notices that some facilities and records had been rewound by nearly 20 years. But who is the mastermind behind all of this? Whoever it is, they will have to discover them quickly. Kartathea reassures Lupa that they can have faith in the Rover. And we are returned to Rover and, I guess, other Lupa. The two get their rest, and the final day of the Great Aegon is here. As the two enter the Colosseum, Arsinosa, the guardian echo of Septimont, makes her appearance. But Rover notices that this Arsinosa is quite different to the one that they had seen Kartathea fighting. The Great Aegon was a lot more brutal in the past. In fact, it was previously named the Bloody Aegon, which, as you can probably tell from the name, didn't end very well for the losers. It is said that Mia had claimed her victory title and received Arsinosa's blessing, but she disappeared before claiming her reward. What happened to her is nothing but a mystery to the people of Septimont. And with that, Rover and Lupa are thrown into battle, and this is where things get a little bit creepy, as well as very confusing. Amidst the battle, Kartathea's frequency becomes stronger, and Rover is transported to a weird, red fog-infested area, where they are forced to fight off rampant tacit discords. Rover is no longer in the original arena. Kartathea can also be seen in an intense battle with the other version of Arsinosa, a version that has been tainted by the dark tide and driven into a frenzy. There are now 3 battles being fought at the exact same time. One where Kartathea is, one where Rover was transported to, the Bloody Aegon, and one at the Great Aegon with Lupa. Just in different realms or timelines, I guess. All of which are overlapping with each other at this very moment. Of course, at this time, it's hard to say exactly what is happening, for sure. I guess that is something that will be explained to us in the second half of the patch. After a fierce battle, tainted Arsinosa, the Tacit Discords in the Bloody Aegon, and the opposing team in the Great Aegon are simultaneously defeated, and their battles are won. Rover and Lupa are crowned the victors of the Great Aegon and receive their medals as well as a blessing from Arsinosa. The crowd erupts with cheers and praises, and the Great Aegon reaches its finale. At the end of the quest, we witness a meeting between Kartathea and Cristoforo, in which Kartathea instantly threatens Cristoforo. But in typical Cristoforo style, Bro is just completely smug and unbothered. He states that this story cannot be undone. I really do hate this guy so much, but he is a fantastic antagonist. And with that being said, Act 5 Shadow of Glory comes to its end. So first I want to discuss the anomaly that everyone and their mother seems to be mentioning throughout the story quest. When talking to Buling, she says that she is visiting Septimont for the famous Great Aegon, but also mentions that Septimont is caught in some sort of an anomaly. She says that she can feel it, but is unable to exactly pinpoint where it's coming from. All she knows is that to get out of it, Rover seems to be the key. Of course, it is unclear how long Septimont has been caught in this anomaly, especially considering the 3 timelines. Realms, places, versions, whatever you want to call them. All of them seem to be coexisting at the same time. But to make things easier, we're just going to refer to them as timelines, since the book that Frolova hands us also alludes to this. Timeline 1 is the Great Aegon timeline, which is the one we have mostly been playing in throughout the quest, where things seem mostly normal and pleasant, with Rover not really running into any major problems. Timeline 2 is Kartathea's timeline. This one is following Kartathea's journey in Septimont. However, in this timeline, Septimont appears to be mostly in ruins, with barely a soul in sight, only Lupa, or at least another version of Lupa. One thing to note is that when we are in this timeline, Lupa is referred to as the Nameless Girl. This version of Septimont also seems to be overrun with tacit discords. Along with the mentioning of the Dark Tide, this may be Septimont in the future, but how it gets to this point is unclear at this time. The third and final timeline is the Bloody Aegon timeline, which we only get to see properly towards the end of the quest, where Rover is forced to fight off an army of Tacit Discords. Now, if we're going along with the 3 separate timelines actually being timelines, the Great Aegon timeline could be the present, the Cartithia timeline could be the future, and the Bloody Aegon timeline could be the past, with each of them leading up to an intense battle they must win. And this may just be a play that is nothing but the works of the sneaky little Cristoforo. One of the most popular theories of what the heck is going on in Septimont is the Sonorosphere theory. As a refresher, Sonorospheres are spaces of an abundance of remnant energy and are able to preserve transdimensional knowledge that is often used to further study the lament. They are mostly naturally occurring phenomenons, but there are some artificial Sonorospheres like the simulation training or Frolova's creepy Hecate realm. Speaking of Frolova, during Rova's conversation with her during the 2.4 quest, she states that Cristoforo has an obsession with heroic tales, and that the anomaly in Septimont is part of the threads in his tapestry. Every hero's tale begins with a trial, and Cristoforo wants front row seats to bear witness to said trial, but I guess also to be the director, which may mean that the Septimont we are experiencing might not actually be real, but a Sonorosphere created by Cristoforo, where 3 timelines are coexisting with each other. However, Sonorospheres are also known to distort information, making it difficult to remove the original contents, which could explain why the part Cartithia is in has records dated from nearly 20 years ago. But it can also explain why Mia and Lupa are intertwined with another, because each timeline is coexisting and overlapping with each other in the Sonorosphere, with Cristoforo simply pulling the strings. What makes Sonorosphere so interesting as well as immensely eerie is that there is a possibility that if someone were to die in a Sonorosphere, a copy of that deceased person can be made and that copy would be fully sentient. This copy is also at high risk of being corrupted by maligned frequencies, which can result in corrupting their physical form entirely. Since Cristoforo has an infatuation with stories, is this Septimont just a means for him to see how multiple stories play out? Or is there an even more sinistrous goal behind all of this? And the biggest question being, can this story be rewritten? Cartithia seems to think so, and I guess also Frolova. Frolova does suggest that if Rover takes out Lupa, then maybe it could be stopped. The only thing is, Frolova doesn't exactly have a great track record of being the nicest person, or even trustworthy. So I wouldn't blame Rover for not believing her when she suggests such a thing to them. Especially because she basically says, hey, trust me or don't trust me. It doesn't really matter to me. Cristoforo, however, seems to be a firm believer that his plan will work out, with him telling Cartithia that she will not be able to undo his story. He makes it sound so definitive, which is terrifying, because how much power does this guy have? And why is he so sure that everything will work out for him? Septimont and Raguna are 2 of the same, just presented differently, with both being immensely infested with corruption. One thing that stood out to me during the end of the 2.4 quest is what Cristoforo says to Cartithia. He states that the architects of this tragedy were the Septimontians themselves. A collective murder so entertainingly woven. With blood on every hand, who's left to point the finger? Septimont's entire thing is strength, with their creed being all for glory, fear no death. Which is not only a very loose creed, but a dangerous one. Because with this creed being so loose, many Septimontians use it as a justification for their misdeeds. Similar to how we see the Order use the Sentinel to justify their misdeeds. As long as strength and glory is the goal, who cares how we get there, right? Which has led to a mass amount of corruption throughout Septimont, between the noble families and the common folk themselves. In one of the side quests called Flames in the Deep, we meet a character named Medelius, a man driven by the thrills of watching gladiator battles. And when watching a daughter refuse to defeat her own father in battle, Medelius was not moved, but disappointed. Only those who give everything for glory earn a place in Septimont. And I guess that includes offing your loved ones. Even the gladiators themselves are no strangers to corruption, with some of them, like Emilio, engaging in match fixing with the Silvers. More importantly, gladiators like Mia were forced to forge on in the name of glory, despite her mind literally falling apart throughout the Aegon, with her manager John along with those around her exploiting her as a means to turn a profit. Even when she was at her lowest, witnessed by the common folk for crying in the lounge, breaking down as her mind became more and more corrupted, no one cared. Even the nobles stating that everyone loves her as long as she's winning. And that, unfortunately, is all that matters. Not who she is as a person, her struggles, or her life. All that matters is glory, because everything is all for glory, fear no death. All I'm going to say is that I cannot wait for the next part of Septimont's story, because this cliffhanger nearly brought me to a mental breakdown. Whatever happens next is going to be insane. And with that being said, we have reached the end of our time together today. Please feel free to let me know in the comments your personal thoughts and theories on what we discussed. And as always, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you in the next one, guys. Take care. Bye.